I'm going to be doing a quick little mini painting and focusing on using warm and cool tones to set the atmosphere of your painting. I'm actually going to be sketching still from Game of Thrones because I am a sucker for it. So right now I'm just mapping out very basic shapes. I have the shot pulled up on my computer, so I'm just kind of quickly sketching. It's a fucking dragon. Mm-mm-mm-mm. And so one thing that is really important to understand when you're drawing scenes that require depth, and I think clouds do a really good job of illustrating it, is showing layers just by what is what is being hit by light and what is being cast into shadow. So this is obviously pretty sloppy, but I'll be painting soon. But essentially, the way our eyes break down what we're seeing is by depth and shadow and color and saturation and how in focus it is. And so by drawing, we try to mimic that kind of interaction. And whenever something is being hit, you have to consider where its shadow would be. You don't have to like map it out or anything. You can if it helps you study, but as the layers go, it's always the darkest part of this row is going to be right before the lightest part behind it, because I'll draw a little bit, because what that represents or what that illustrates is this light is hitting this, and therefore this part of the cloud is being cast into shadow. This light reaches past this, and this is the next layer of clouds behind it. If that doesn't really make sense, it might when I start painting. I don't know how confusing that concept is. So in this still, the very top is pretty much outer space. It's super high up, and the clouds are all below it. And then there's a very distant, dark cloud. And then next, there's the foreground cloud, which means it's the closest to the viewer. And this is being lit up by the scenery. And so that's our light source for the entire painting, is this beam of fire. And while we have the blue cool clouds above, we have light breaking up, so the flames hitting the ground, causing more clouds. And these are all warm and brighter. So even though there's fewer of these and they're smaller, they will be brighter than the ones because it's more of a reflection, where this one is right here. I'm sure this kind of looks like nothing right now, but like I said, I'll be painting soon. So I'm going to set the sky first. So we're going to work on cool tones first. I might jump back into them if I find it's necessary after the warm, but I'm going to get most of the cool covered right now. For my palette, I just have phthalo blue, which is like a concentrated blue-green, and just regular old Mars black and titanium white. And then for the warm, I'll be using a cadmium red and yellow ochre, probably. Okay, so I'm going to start in outer space. So it's pretty much black, but I tinted it with blue. Okay, so this is the furthest that we can see. It's also the darkest. And I'm just going to slowly and gradually lighten the color that I'm making so that I can make the new layers of clouds and highlight what I need to. And I will go back over this with dark to cast more clouds and shadow, but for now we're just establishing stuff. So it'll be a little bit subtle. I'm going to add just a tiny bit more white and kind of just scatter it, Bob Ross style. And this will, once I get back to it and to detail it more, this will be the third layer, so it's like the distant clouds, and these are the foreground clouds. And so the lighter colors that are scattered signify, they point out like, okay, if these parts of the clouds are being lit up, then we have to allow the shadow to be sitting behind it, because otherwise it won't work. It won't look right. It's gotta have a shadow. Sometimes I wonder if it's weird that I don't have music, but at the same time, I really enjoy listening to stuff like spoken word, like documentaries or something, and then putting music on behind it. So I figure this way, if you did want to listen to music, I'm not gonna clash with it. Cool story, huh? Okay. So there's a burst of warmth in the middle of a bunch of cold. But since the warmth is mostly central, the darkest I can get is going to be a very, very dark blue-black. And it creeps in from the sides. There's this wall of cloud and wind coming. The loose brush strokes are what give it that texture. I am going to go over it, but again, it's nice to remind that I need to focus on that texture change. Get a little more black for this. Man, I do feel like Bob Ross sometimes. Oh man, I'm going to edit that out. Okay, so that's planted down. I'm just going to do some really basics shapes of the warm tones. I got to be careful because this is still wet enough that if I get too close to it with a warm color, it's just going to kind of become muddy. So that's important to remember, that like if you want distinct detail, keep your brights away from your brights, keep it crisp and try not to blur too much, because if you want detail, you need to be tight. Okay, I'm gonna get my warm colors. Okay, I'm gonna set some of the basics of the warm. I will focus with the brightest point and then work my way out. I find it useful if, like, okay, so I'm painting the brightest point where I'm about to be, but I'm not going to go straight to white, because you want to save your darkest dark and your brightest bright for like the very end, because you want it to be the focus. You want that to pop. And if you go straight for white, you can't build up to it. You're just, you top yourself out. So, well, hey look, I'm shedding. I was talking about the loose brush strokes. So you can get like a kind of like a brush stroke and see the lines within it if you want that texture. For flame and for cloud and for stuff like that, I prefer doing like kind of like a dab. Right now I think I have too much paint on this brush, but so it's a little bit different and it looks a little bit more like flame. So I'll be layering color over this to make it look more dynamic and just laying the ground of it. So I'm mixing the next darkest tone, and even with warm, there you still have to think like just because it's a bright cloud doesn't mean it still won't have shadow. So while we're looking at shadow, and it will be bright-ish. Oh man, I'm just mumbling. And once we know that this is dry, I'm going to be incorporating the warm tones on top of the cold clouds. Alright, I'm going to let that set for a minute so I can add to it later. I'm going to go kind of detailed for a moment. Okay. So this still looks like slop, but it is heading somewhere. Right now I'm going to jump into some of the stuff where the cool and the warm interact. In this middle ground, this light, which I'll end up cleaning up, is going to interact with the cool clouds above it, and so that's what I'm going to try to capture now. And it kind of looks like I'm scribbling because I am. Clouds are one of the very few things that, like, it's really, as long as you get the shape kind of accurate, you can really just make it up as you go, which is nice. And because this is a storm rolling in, there's like a wall of wind and clouds, so signify that by shedding light on it. And because this isn't going to be as bright, I'm just going to go back. I just dipped my brush in water. That way I can make it more subtle. And if I want to exaggerate it later, I can. I'm going to do More of a subtle area. And again, just dipping in water and then breaking this up. I haven't really talked about tools. I think I'm probably going to do a video just on like how I go about purchasing supplies and whatnot. But even if you just do this for a hobby or something, like you can spend a little bit of money and still be way better than like the cheapest of the cheap. So I recommend grabbing like multi-packs. Like Bleak always has like giant coupons for like buy one get one half or 40% off your whole sale or whatever. But getting yourself a variety of brushes allows you to experiment because one of the most important parts of painting is the textures that you create, and there's no way that I could do these clouds with square brush personally, just like I wouldn't like to do buildings with a fan brush, and sometimes we convince ourselves that it's not worth spending money on because you're not good at it, but fuck that. If you want to learn, invest in yourself. Okay, I'm going to do more muted tone of the same color so I can have a kind of between. So, this is an interesting little tidbit. Because of the palette and the colors that are going on in the scene, this area that I just did looks like there's being light shed on, like yellow light shed on the cloud, but this is actually like super olive green, but it all depends on how you're using it. I'm going to quickly just patch up the background right here. So, the same way that you can add to stuff to make shape, it's good to try out subtracting to make shape. Okay, so again, I'll revisit this. An interesting way to approach painting is it kind of has like a repeated pattern of add and subtract, like general to the specific. Put it down and then revisit it later. And it's nice to acknowledge that and remind yourself that there's plenty more to paint. Never mind, what the fuck was that? So, I'm going to continue refining, just going in until it's at a new level of detail, and then jump to a new area, and then while that dries, jump to a new area while that dries, and just continue cycling. So I'll do that in a time lapse.